Hold the microphone for me.
Okay, let's see JohnBenet as well. What do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be a doctor or a nurse to help people get well.
What kind of doctor you want to be?
A pediatrician.
Great.
When JonBenet Ramsey was asked what she wanted to be someday, she answered, a doctor or a nurse. When asked what sort of doctor, JonBenet said, a pediatrician. This really elevates, I think, the impact Dr. Booth and perhaps also that of his wife Penny had on the Ramseys and on JonBenet herself. Remember, if in her bathroom that picture was painted by the pediatrician's wife, that was something that JonBenet looked at every single day. And of course, Dr. Booth was ready to flatter the little girl himself, telling Paula Woodward on one occasion, I think she was extraordinary in the amount of charm that she had, and sweetness was the quality I appreciated most. He's talking about a 6-year-old.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Now, in terms of the pageant, I've no doubt Patsy put her up for this. That Patsy coached JonBenet to give the answer she gave and specifically had the little girl practice the word pediatrician, not exactly a word that rolls off the tongue. And how many 6-year-olds do you know who say, Mom, can we go to the pediatrician again? In a pageant setting, saying she wants to be a pediatrician, a doctor who helps children, is clearly a winner, and the host oohs and ahs her approval once the little girl is done. This may be successful pageanting, but is it successful parenting? If JonBenet is taught to say certain things when the real JonBenet wanted to be a vet, that's something she mentioned in another pageant. How good is that for a little girl?
JonBenet, what's your favorite color? And what's your favorite food you like to eat? What do you want to be? Veterinarian?
In this analysis, we want to ask a more general question with regard to parenting, and it's a question I'm not sure I've ever seen asked. Can not a lack of attention, but a certain type of attention from parents be harmful? And can there be such a thing as too much attention? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. By the way, something is coming. Something new is coming to members only on YouTube, a bonus series coming to TCRS. I'll tell you more about it over the weekend. If you find this analysis worthwhile, please hit the thanks button and let's get started. So what is overparenting? It's this idea of too much attention and a certain type of attention that's harmful. What is overparenting? Well, it's a style where parents are overly involved in their children's lives. It's actually stifling, suffocating. It's very limiting. It's also known as helicopter parenting. Now, instead of neglect, you have excessive support, excessive affection, excessive control, excessive monitoring. And so what is happening is you're failing to give children age-appropriate autonomy, a chance for them to spread their wings and to find themselves, to stand on their own. All of this excessive intervention and interference prevents children from experiencing failure or challenge or developing on their own. Now, right now, I'm reading the autobiography of Bill Gates, and as early as the prologue, he talks about securing a certain amount of freedom and independence from his parents, and especially his mother. This allowed him to roam with a group of friends on strenuous hikes and expeditions beyond what they were allowed to do as part of a Boy Scout troop in Oregon. If that's healthy parenting, listening to a child's needs and giving them the space or support they need, what is unhealthy? And was anything to do with the pageants in JonBenet's case unhealthy, not just psychologically, but perhaps physically as well? And that brings us to the curious case of an Australian ballerina. This little girl was bathed in attention, as you're about to see. It wasn't a lack of attention, it was the type of attention that was the problem. Now let's look at 6 warning signs through this case of the Australian ballerina, where parents are crossing the line with child rearing, and see how these are intertextual. It's really, really interesting to the Ramsey case. Number 1, obvious health issues. According to CNN, by the time the girl was admitted to hospital, this is the Australian ballerina, she was 147.5 centimeters, that's 4 feet 10 inches. That's how tall she was, with a body mass index of 12.5. That's significantly below the healthy range of 18 to 25. Her hair was brittle, her skin was flaking, and she was so malnourished that doctors said she was at risk of cardiac arrest and death. This is a situation where a child is the center of both parents' attention. She's in such an obvious state of poor health, she's ultimately hospitalized and at imminent risk of dying, and yet her parents can't seem to see this or recognize this. Not to put too fine a point on it, but both John and Patsy's true bills, voted for by the grand jury after 13 months of investigation and testimony, included an accusation of risking the health of a child, which then ultimately resulted in her death. Somewhat ambiguous in the true bill is the time element. On the one hand, it suggests the reckless act was limited to somewhere between December 25th and 26th. On the other hand, it seems to refer obliquely to placing her in a situation. Now, it's not clear whether that situation was a specific situation that night or whether that situation had occurred before and the parents ought to have known what to expect from said situation and not placed in that situation again. In other words, was there a situation that was continuous and had gone on prior to the date of the actual incident? And you can imagine in the case of this Australian ballerina that she was placed in a situation that was continuous, that went on for a length of time, and this situation led to her being malnourished. And so, can you see, this is an important question, especially when considering the merits of something else, such as prior trauma in a particular area. In any event, JonBenet also had obvious health issues. Her 33 doctor visits in 3 years can't be seen as normal, despite, in my opinion, the assessment of her pediatrician, who seemed to confidently assert that it was normal. Now we're going to come back. Another anecdote involving Dr. Buff and JonBenet's health, so hold on for that. Number 2, significantly changing the appearance or identity of the child. This is another warning sign. This girl, this Australian ballerina, was 17, but she looked much younger. Witnesses at the hospital said that her parents treated her as if she were a small child. This is even in the hospital in public. Now, with JonBenet, it was the opposite. She was just 6 years old, but looked older. She was made to look older. She looked older because that was exactly what her beauty queen mother was trying to do, basically make this child in her own image. This crucial aspect is either minimized or glossed over entirely in a lot of the coverage of JonBenet Ramsey.
Okay, pick one, JonBenet. Okay. What is your favorite animal at the zoo?
The monkeys, because they laugh and stuff and hang around.
As when she was not on stage, JonBenet acted like any little girl.
She was a normal little 6-year-old that
Was she normal? Some people say it was normal. To others, not much about this case does seem normal. The ransom note and so many other things. And so just a reminder, in terms of this idea of adultifying JonBenet, if that's the word, remember Dr. Buff saying, I think she was extraordinary in the amount of charm that she had. Well, John Douglas made a similar remark, treating her in a sense like an adult. In his book he writes, I was under the impression that JonBenet had been a professional model rather than just a participant in child beauty pageants. If memory serves, Lou Smith said something similar. I've been trying to find video where he says that. I haven't been able to confirm that, but I seem to remember Lou Smith also assuming in the beginning that JonBenet was older. Does that ring a bell with anyone? This is, of course, very ironic because even after both men, Lou Smith and John Douglas, both seasoned investigators, once they were corrected on JonBenet's true age, they ended up imputing a perpetrator that was some sort of adult outsider anyway. some sort of savage paedophile anyway. Certainly Lou Smith did. In other words, their bias in their approach to the case, in terms of JonBenet's age, even when corrected, returns via the assessment of the imagined perpetrator, an adult with some very adult perversions. Really? Is that the only possible inference here? Is it the only logical assumption here? Meanwhile, studies suggest that as many as a third of SA cases against children are perpetrated by other children. What's important to look at here is the age of this child. It's not a teenager. It's not a child that's sort of just prepubescent. It's a very young child, 6 years old. And so what do the statistics say about very young children? And so one admittedly dated peer-reviewed study from 1988, I'll put a link to that in the description, provides surprising alacrity in its statistical findings. In a study of almost 50 boys, the mean age of perpetration was just under 9 years old. Victims were an average of 6 years old, and in almost half the cases, the SA was of a younger sibling. Have a look at this. The bottom line is that changing the age of a child, how the child appears and presents him or herself, can have serious consequences, not just for that child, in terms of the child's physical and psychological health, but also how this child relates or indeed cannot relate to their peers, and importantly, vice versa. What impact has this change of appearance, in JonBenet's case making her appear to be older than she really is, what impact does that have on her peers, on her friends, on her sibling? All right, I think that's enough for now. This is the end of part 1 of part 3. I'll be posting part 2 in the next 2 or 3 days, so look out for that. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.